Hello everybody. Let's go to a pretty live session. I've got like a 3-hour workshop here. A lot of it comes from Google actually. How I was trained in design thinking by Google. But with this session we're going to take it easy. We've got lunch in half an hour. So I'm really going to I created 8 steps on how I approach just about every meeting. It's a reminder for me. So, and I'll go through these 8 steps. I think for some of you this might be really valuable to apply some of these steps. You can mold it, make it your own. You won't find this in any books. This is just my way of doing things, and it comes from a lot of things. Like for example, the last 3 years, I read a book a day, literally. When I basically turned 40, I started reading a book. It was the first one. I didn't read one book up until then. It was like The Hobbit. I read it like 50 times. I can't read, I'm dyslexic. So I listened to books. And I discovered audiobooks. I discovered, podcasts, Audible, to storytelling. I do a lot of gym, and I was traveling a lot. I was living in France, working in Holland, so I was driving like 20 hours a week sometimes. And so they gave me the opportunity to listen to books. And so I got into that habit. The first one was Rich Dad Poor Dad, Richard Kawasaki, and that got me on a rhythm. And for 3 years I did it all day. And one thing I learned that spanned all those 3 years is that knowledge means nothing unless you apply it. So that was a really key one, where like 3 months ago I stopped listening to books and I started doing stuff, building a new company. And but what listening to books did, it helped me as a speaker, because now I don't say I don't stutter anymore, because when you listen to these books, there's none of that anymore. There's none of that. And so you sort of start to listen and speak instead of read and write. And it's a much more natural way of communicating. And so I discovered all these books, and one of them I shared with you, The Coaching Habits, by far not the best one, but it was a very practical book that helped me. And I noticed myself speeding up, literally speeding up to the point where I'm even talking quite fast now, and sometimes I can go, and because I listened to these books in 2.5 times speed. And so I started to realize I was going way too fast in meetings, and I developed the first principle, the first thing, and that is when you approach a meeting, slow down. And that's how these 8 steps started to form. It was just a literally thing. I was basically solving a problem of mine on how to deal with this, how to deal with really being present in a meeting. We operate from that communication. Okay, so we'll have to just click through these. That's the presentation. By the way, just before we get into it, any questions while I flick through these slides? Anything that you wanted to ask while I was presenting this? Any comments, any remarks? Design thinking, we'll go through a bit of that. Anyone watch Red Sparrow? Good stuff, huh? Good movie. Oh, check. Let's see. So we'll go to it. So yeah, we'll cover the 8 steps, and then just do an exercise on empathy. It's going to be really, really relaxed, you'll see. But you'll be amazed, some people just realize that they're not listening. And that's what the exercise really helps you to understand, that listening is probably your most powerful thing there is. When you listen, you get insights. And when you have those insights, you can react to people, things much better. So one thing, I got this from Google actually. This is someone taught me this, and this was about 2 years ago, and it was pretty profound. I mean, before meeting someone, anybody, empty your head, remove your thoughts, and start the meeting with a desire to learn about the other person. Now, you can reverse engineer that. How nice is it when you start to meet someone and they're interested in you? Because most people are so on the go so quickly that it's like, hey, I'm here. And you see this of both ways. So you can reverse engineer that. If you are that person that's listening, that's asking the right questions, that's really curious about, so what are you up to? Why do you feel that way? Why do you say that? Oh, that's interesting. And then you basically inquire. Then, one thing is, people will talk forever about themselves. If you let them. use that to your advantage. Let them speak, because the more you speak, the more they speak, the more powerful you become. Information is power. It's Australia, right? The movie. And that you do this too much, and it can work against you because now you're just taking. So sometimes you have to break the conversation, give back, say something about yourself. So
You can click.
Oh yeah, sorry. So the first step I developed. Oh, hang on, I've probably got, no, it's fine, I've got it.
No, you can.
Probably the battery's dead, I guess. This stuff doesn't work without energy, by the way.
Yeah, there's no lights on it.
What happens when you're in a desert, you don't have energy, when you just need solar panels. Okay, so slow down. And this is a really big thing, where you see it in your relationships, in your work. You see it with your managers sometimes. They're just in and they're out, they want something, and they want to get it as quickly as possible, and they want to go through it as quickly as possible. And when someone's going quick, then you feel left out. You feel like, oh man, okay, I'm sorry for taking your time. I have to, then you have to perform within their time constraints. When time is our most valuable asset. It runs out for all of us. We all die. And when you can give time to somebody, that is the biggest gift you can give. And of course, it comes at a cost because your time is your most valuable asset. So it's listening. So this is literally, I'm just going to go through some of these. I'm going to spend more time on, some of them less. Listening is the best thing you can do, the most powerful tool you have in years, and because it gives you insights on how to react. So remember when I say what's on your mind, that first question, the first question also Facebook is asking you, and Google putting up that search bar, and really they're listening. They're listening through you typing to them. But it's the same thing with verbal conversations. You can listen to people speak. Finding rapport. Anyone here know what rapport is? Anyone? It's probably the wrong question. I want to say, does anyone not know what rapport is, but you've probably done into it, all of that. So rapport is really about, rapport is a French word, it's rapport, and it's about giving back the way you receive. So it's in the Bible as well, speak to others as they speak to you. And it's really, so rapport is a remarkable thing because everybody's different. So the way I learn as a speaker on stage is that there are three types of people. There are kinesthetic people, there are auditory people, and there are visual people. And there are different models for that. But generally the crowd is separated into three. And the kinesthetic people are the people that feel. They slow down, they want to connect with you. There's a lot of heart there. They want to really get into the relationship. The auditory people are the numbers and figures, facts, the logic. They just like rhythm. They like consistency. They like predictability. And the visual people are the ones that, you need to do this to get their attention. You need to have big images, big things, high things, lots of volume. And the way I applied this morning, I apply this to the way to bring everybody in is to start. So when you're dealing with a group, for example, a C-level, when you're trying to convince a whole board, you want to bring everybody in. Now you don't know what category they sit in, but there's a tactic called the charisma pattern on how to bring these people in and find a little bit of rapport with everybody. And that's that you start kinesthetic, you start slow, you start really by maybe sharing something personal about yourself. That's what I did on stage, and I started with a voice, and my hands are here, so I'm just sort of trying to connect with the kinesthetic people. Now the visual people are probably going on, this guy again, sort of the soft stuff, but then I got into more predictable stuff. I started, you got into a rhythm, Steve Jobs, the crazy ones, and then you saw I got into a rhythm, and I started to, and that pulls in the auditory people, and then we went into the moon, the folding the paper, moving around, people jumping on stage, and that brings in the visual people. So basically what I did is I tried to connect with the crowd, the whole crowd. You're looking for a broad range appeal. You can apply that to a boardroom, although you've got 5 or 10 people. As an individual, now you're not dealing with an audience, now you need to figure out, Are they a sensitive person? Are they kinesthetic? And this is sales tactics. So even on the phone, you can do it. You ask a few questions, they speak, so you're listening, you're trying to find rapport, and then you come down to their level, you go up to their level. So if they're really blah, 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 and they're very visual, then you come up to that visual. Also, because now they're going to find rapport with you, you're going to connect. And that sets the tone for how you progress in the discussion. So finding rapport, speak to others as they speak to you. And for that, you need to listen first. Never interrupt. And I added this, unless they need you to. Because remember, people will speak forever about themselves. And you can let them speak forever. But guess what happens when they just hold a monologue for 20 minutes, for 10 minutes? Yeah, man, they feel bad at the end. They'll feel good until they realize it was just about me. I actually know nothing about the other person. Didn't even take the time, didn't even ask the question. And sometimes it's nice when you're holding a monologue. Let's say you're in a group of 5 people, you're holding a monologue, you're talking, and you're going, who's gonna take the next role? And so sometimes people need you to interrupt them. But this is very much an empathetic thing. You need to realize when they're going off track and they need you to pull them back, then that's something that's very powerful as well. But generally, never interrupt and let people finish what they have to say. To make people feel important and appreciated, they first have to feel heard and understood. That's something I left out of this one, because otherwise it was too much of those red slides. They're heard and understood. And you see that in kids. If they're not, a lot of you have small kids, and they'll keep screaming louder and louder and louder, and even get really annoyed if they're not understood. That's when they're going through 3, 4, 5. And this is just a general thing, is that we need to feel heard and understood. And so are the people listening? And are they seeing the world through our perspective so that they're actually understanding our pain and our point of view? So now you need to engage. Ask interesting questions, ask probing questions, ask smart questions. One of the most powerful things you can do is ask the right question, because often asking the right question summarizes almost everything. And someone goes, you could basically stop someone in their tracks by asking the right question. And that can actually win you the deal in the end, especially when you're speaking at C-level. A lot of chatter, a lot of talk, a lot of confusion, everyone's trying to do something, and then someone comes in with that question, they go, damn, shit, now they've landed the discussion. So really, what you need to do in the discussion is, it comes from experience, it's often not had at the first go, but always try to we're very much busy with the what, the tactical, the what, sometimes the how, but those why questions are often the probing questions. They're the ones that really go down deeper into the underlying problem. So why do you feel this way? Or why did you apply this method? And then what you find when you ask these questions is that they go, oh, well, now they're cued for, you're actually caring about, what's the, so for example, I spoke to Brian, your founder. After that talk, after the presentation, I spent at least an hour and a half with him backstage. At least, maybe even 2. We lost track of time. We went, and we didn't speak about technology. We spoke more about why we even built Liferay in the first place. And it goes deep into religion, into his children, and we went deep. We went down to universal mind, cosmos, how things are connected. And all I was doing is I was asking him more probing questions. I was going, so why did you build Liferay? It started in a church and had nothing to do with this type of technology. And then, why do you do that? Well, it was a search for meaning, and it was a search for really about, those existential questions. Why are we here? How do we get here? And what do we do? And we're always trying to answer these questions. And he went way, way down, way deeper than I expected him to. But all I was doing is asking interesting questions, which led to 1.5 hour discussion. That's a pretty valuable thing with a founder of Liferay. I had no idea that would happen. Find common ground. So this also applied to Brian, because those 300 books I read. Well, suddenly I'm building that puzzle of life. I'm starting to figuring out, these things are connecting, and really what we are. It's this life is a big puzzle. It's the puzzle of meaning, sort of why are we here? And we try to fill that in with work, with relationships, with connection with ourselves, with health, with wealth, with just also enjoying going on holidays, enjoying new cultures. We're trying to fill that all in. And so it's about finding common ground. So those questions often I shared interesting insights about myself that related to what he was saying. So he felt like, geez, he's actually listening. Or geez, we actually have something in common. And finding this common ground, that is that slide I put up that says, the secret in life is to connect what you want with what the other person wants. This comes from Tony Robbins, by the way. It probably comes from it's a basic principle. I think I heard it from Tony Robbins. I've never been to one of his seminars, let's say. I'm not that sort of person. I've been to only one seminar in my whole life, and that was Eric Edmonds, the guy that gave me that quote. And that was 3 months ago to launch my speaking career, and that was it. It's the only seminar I've ever been to. The seminar junkies keep going, oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that because now I'm disconnecting with some people. All right, where was I? Find common ground. So really what you're doing, you're listening to them, figuring out what do they want, what are their challenges, what's getting in their way, and trying to figure out, okay, so how can I help in a way? And helping can sometimes just be a good listener. And then not putting, we often want the transaction at the end, but it's a multi-step process and not wanting everything in that one discussion. So with Brian, all I wanted to do was meet him. My KPI was an Instagram photo. Now, is he willing to get on? So I got it. All right. Empathize. So empathize, and that's further down the training, that's really part of the design thinking, is really understanding what's the point of view of the other person. Do I really understand what the other person means? What are they saying? What's the underlying pain? Why are they saying that? And formulating a point of view. We're not going to get that in this workshop, but there is a process for that. And it's really about figuring out, what is their viewpoint at that particular moment. And that's really empathizing. But empathizing does nothing. Empathizing is just listening. Just listening. Empathy has nothing to do with action. There was the founder of LinkedIn, did a commencement speech recently. He spoke about empathy versus compassion. Empathy is listening, compassion is actually doing something about it. So that Chinese proverb, there's this boulder in the road, and empathizing is really understanding that the boulder's there. Yeah, it's a pretty tough thing to get around. Yeah. But is anyone going to move it? Is anyone going to try and overcome this obstacle? And that's really where compassion comes in, is doing something about it. So in a conversation context, that, as a manager, for example, that means following up. It means actually caring about the problem with the other person and doing something about it. So I spoke about those 4 questions. What's on their mind? What do they want? What's the challenge? And how can I help? So how can I help is really how can I build a prototype? The next step to that is how can I build trust by acting in their best interest, by actually taking the time and the effort to follow up and to help them down that MVP process, which is what comes after a prototype in technology. Minimum viable product, testing features, getting feedback, testing assumptions. And this is really about working through problems now. So this is an 8-step process. It works for me. I generally look at it every time I go into an important meeting, come to an event. I'll just read, I've got it in Evernote, and I force myself just to read over it. Because in between it's just going at lightning speed. And this helps just to reset, just to recalibrate myself so that I land correctly and that I'm present. And man, trust me, I'm struggling with this a lot. I know a lot of you are struggling. I've got a wife, I've got 3 kids, and the more I apply this to this, and I'm sure a lot of you are relating to this, the more I apply it to work, to conferences, the less I apply it at home. It's tough. It's a balance you need to manage. So at the end of the day, our resources are limited, our attention is limited, our time is limited, and it's a choice we have to make. So this is a quote by Larry Page. There is no substitute for personally watching and listening to real people. So what one of the principles Google's use is the Toothbrush Test. Anyone know it? Everything they built has the has to abide by the toothbrush test rule. And that is, will people use it twice a day? It's that simple. If you've got people queuing in on whatever you're building twice a day, then you've got something big on your hands. And that's really comes by listening, observing to the user, figuring out how they live their lives. What do they want? What are the challenges in their life? And trying to solve for that so that you build something that they're going to need twice a day. This is design thinking. So let's see, who here knows design thinking? Has taken a course on it? Very few, huh? I expected more from developers, but then again, you guys develop. Google. Who here works in Scrum, in Agile? So almost all of you. But you don't apply design thinking processes. Basically, you've got stakeholders coming in, and you figure out a priority list on what we need to put on the roadmap and what we need to do. So usually the step before that, before you start to build a solution, you're really using design thinking principles, and it's probably done, but then at an earlier stage than when you're. Then again, that's not necessarily true, because when you look at Facebook and when you look at Google, even in the development process, a lot of design thinking is applied, because a lot of these prototypes are just simply small features of the larger MVP. And you're always starting with the user, figuring out what the problems are of that user. So you're empathizing with the user, you're listening to their concerns, to their demands, you're interviewing them, you're speaking with them. Maybe you are one of them, but you're certainly speaking to them. You define the problem, asking why, getting deeper and deeper. You brainstorm on a solution. So this is know the user, 10x thinking. Brainstorming is in two phases. First, it's divergent. So you're coming up with as many ideas as possible. And then it's convergent. Now you're coming up with concepts on potential solutions that you can prototype. I just did a hackathon last week at the DEVCON convention. We actually built a model for sustainable innovation in our team. I was almost going to open with that today, but it's too early. But it's a pretty cool model. It's called the activation loop, and it's actually how to activate activate innovation in any industry, and it's based on the Nash equilibrium. John Nash, Nobel Prize winner, 1994, game theory, and it's basically acting in the best interest of the individual and the team at the same time. And around this concept, there were 5 of us. We built an activation loop, which is really a sustainable innovation model that can be applied to any industry and any theme. We didn't win the hackathon. I pitched it. It's on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, you'll see the pitch, 3-minute pitch. But we got like 6 or 7 messages after that saying, please take the model to the next step. We didn't win because the judges were judging on other criteria, but that wasn't our concern. Our task was to come up with the craziest idea where someone would go, basically, this was a KPI. Someone would say, no way, but I like it. That was the criteria. And then from a concept, you go to a prototype, and then you test it and get feedback. And right now, what we're going to do is a little exercise on the very first step, and that's empathy. This is copy-paste from Google. And the goal is to connect to someone's stories, insights, and emotions. So we're going to team up in twos. You can go with someone you know, someone you don't know, maybe it's even better. And you're going to play roles. So there's A and B. So find a partner, face each other, and determine who's A and B. And then what we're going to do is A is going to speak for 2 minutes. Now, because so you can basically say anything. We're not going to do the follow-up exercise. So the red has it faced a major challenge in your life. We're not going to do that, so it's not necessary. Say something interesting about yourself. Anything, doesn't matter. Something that makes you proud, something you're proud about, or maybe a moment in your life that comes to mind now. Speak about it for 2 minutes. If you run out of things to say, then you have to sit there in silence. So it's going to be untitled. So he's speaking for 2 minutes. I'll time it. 2 minutes. And the other person, all they're doing is listening. You're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to interrupt. You're listening. Okay. No, Google does, if you hear me clap once, say something. If you hear me clap twice, and they had this exercise and everyone's like silent all of a sudden. All right, so you've told, one person told the story, and now it's up to the other person to reflect back. What did you hear? And when you're doing this, you don't want to repeat what the other person said. Most people can't, but some people do that. You want to really address what are the key ideas, the tone that they had, the feelings, and really, if you read this example, you know, what I heard you say is that you felt, and really you're trying to capture the essence of what they were trying to say. So, 2 minutes, and now it's up to the person that was listening to give feedback on how they interpreted this story.
You stop when you clap twice.
Yes. All right, so now the next step is we switch roles. We do it again, and now the other person gets a chance to do it. Let's see, was there a step in between where the other person had to reflect back? No, sorry, there's one step in between, reflect back. No, we just did that, right? We just reflected that. So how did that go, by the way, before we go on to the next one? It's pretty noisy. How did that go? Like, did anyone have anything to say about it? Anything that surprised you?
It works.
What works?
It works if you just told something special or, things you experienced, and you listen to the other reflect and getting basically the same information back. This guy acknowledged me, right? He acknowledged the fact that I was happy at that moment and what I just talked about. He seems to understand what I just said. And it's surprising that you want to interrupt and to enjoy it well, but
So in this case, you were. Anyone experience something else where the other person actually didn't?
I think that 2 minutes, if a speaker is communicating his experience well and don't lose the track, the 2 minutes is too much.
Yeah. Too much?
Yes. For example, we took some subject and after maybe a minute and 30 seconds, there was some improvisations to fill the time. But
I also think it's because you can't ask questions. You want to ask more about what he's telling, but you can't say anything.
Maybe in one moment I will ask something about it, but okay, I already did 2 minutes.
That's personal because I'm passionate about stuff and I thought could talk for 20 minutes. please.
Yeah. So that might say something about you and the way you communicate. I did see some people actually stop after a minute in a previous training, and other people you can't stop at 2 minutes. It's like, really. So you might want to consider, what does that say about me? Am I willing to share? Maybe that's one of the things where, well, am I coming prepared to any conversation with something interesting to say? And because you need this is ammunition now. If silence comes into the conversation, and you often see this, is that you blah, 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 you'll talk, and then it's like, how do I find a way out of here? But if you actually come with something interesting and you have a few stories, backup stories, and then you can fill in those gaps beautifully. And then what you do is you encourage the discussion. Now you say something interesting, and then, hang on, and then this is how you get to that meaningful connection in the end, by really finding common ground. And so with the Google Works, this is part of a 4-hour training, and they're really strict on 2 minutes. You have to stop, and I'll stop you. And I think this whole exercise takes 7 minutes. We're going way over time. But it's interesting. For me, I had no problem talking for 2 minutes. Often, so the strategy I use is, well, I'm a speaker, so I have a ton of little stories that I can tell. But anyone here speak? Do you ever get up on the podium and speak? Anyone would like to speak more on the podium?
Yeah.
I would like more.
Yeah.
For sure.
I don't care.
So it's really, to be a good speaker, often it's just having something interesting to say. And we all,
I think it was like the broadcasting only, that I was missing some interaction with the speaker. If maybe he is really agree with what I understand from their speech. That was, from my perspective, missing it there. I was thinking that he was thinking and want to ask me something, but I was
oh, I see.
Don't answer. Okay,
Yeah.
I understand.
Interaction.
Yeah, the missing interaction, the 2 minutes monologue, it's maybe not more time, but I think so. From the conversation to make some relationship or the record that is missing to this interaction. Only about the asking. I understand. It's clear.
Yeah.
That was
So one little tip I can give for the next, so mind, want, challenge, help. Try never to use but, because whenever you're saying but, you're actually saying that everything that the person just said, I don't agree with, it's wrong. And you're undermining their whole opinion, their whole everything. So only use but when it is corrective, when you're actually correcting something,
Yeah.
and we'll agree we need to fix this. So try and use and, because and encourages further discussion. It encourages sort of opportunistic, let's work together and solve this. And so what you're referring to now is more the process of interviewing, where you're asking questions, you're allowing them to answer on those questions, and then you're not using but, because when you use but, it gets very annoying after a while. It's like everyone's against me, and I need to sort of try to win over an argument. And he's saying, okay, so you went to Italy, and so what happened? Instead of you went to Italy, but you know that like Sardinia is way better, stuff like that. So if you were, because that's the next part of the exercise where it's interview style. This was actually forcing listening.
Yeah.
It was forcing listening, but it's interesting that actually the speaker had a problem getting through the 2 minutes. Who had a problem getting through the whole 2 minutes without? Because maybe it's just two or three. Anyone else had a problem getting through the 2 minutes? Okay, so most of you got through it okay. Okay. So that's another thing, is that as a speaker you can't please everybody.
From my perspective, it was too hard to be interesting 2 minutes with this a lot of noises here. It was
okay.
A lot of energy to spend with it.
The next, so how are we going? Do we want to reverse roles? It's 1:30 already. Okay, we'll go to lunch. So what have we learned from this? Let's just take a couple of minutes, because I'll just skip to the last slide here, which is how did it go? We just did that. And so the takeaways is really empathy requires checking your assumptions at the door, because often we'll interrupt because we know better. we've got a better point of view, no, you're wrong, or did you think about it this way? And that's when we're kids. It's I in Dutch, ik. And then so I think having kids is probably one of the best things you can do to understand relationships. You realize really the human force that we have. It's about attention seeking, it's all about, but I think this, and the other person, but I think that, and but I think this, but I think that. And those types of discussions are it separates the group. But when you use and you're actually not saying, but I think this, you're saying more, that's an interesting perspective, tell me more. And then you're actually engaging and bringing people in, and that's a informed team. So checking your assumptions at the door. Listen first and try to encourage them to say what they need to say, make them feel heard, make them feel understood, and that will give them a sense of, well, I'm not wasting his time, no time, I feel important, and I feel appreciated. And that's simple basic rules. So the feedback that you gave, that's also really good feedback, and I've seen it before. I think it's the minority, but of course, everything's in a bell curve. You're never going to have everyone in the middle. There's going to be outliers. And then what I told you was in an interview style. So one of the biggest, for my personal relationship at home, my wife, one of the biggest lessons I learned is use but less. Because but is for a woman, it's like, oh my. To basically undermining her assumptions and encourage her to speak more. It's using that. Hang on. Is that even one from now in this room? Yeah, there's one there. One. Okay. Two. How does it feel?
What?
No, I think you're the only lady in the room. How does it feel? Oh, two. Two, okay.
Used to it.
Used to it. Are you developer?
Yeah.
I am.
And people manager?
Customer advocacy.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I can see in your place. But again, assumptions, judgment, you gotta be careful about that because we're all guilty about it. But it sometimes makes the other people feel uncomfortable. And then of course we go into the second part, let's apply these, and that was more of an interview style, but it was way too ambitious for a 45-minute workshop. If you get the chance, do a design thinking workshop. It really teaches you on how to focus on the user, on the customer, on the person in front of you, and really teaches you a process on what I described in the keynote. Really getting down to the core of the problem and helping by ideating a solution. So, so I hope this has been useful. And if there's anything you need, like that's more tangible for me, like you need these 8 steps or you need the slide I had back there, just reach out to me either here on LinkedIn. I can send you the presentation. I can send you a screenshot. And good luck.